everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. Today, we have a lot to discuss on our plate. So, we have three articles. All the three articles are from the Hindu newspaper. The first article is titled as The Fault Line of Poor Healthcare Infrastructure. So, this basically talks about the most discussed discussion of these days lately, which talks about the poor structure, the poor system of the healthcare infrastructure in the country. What are the basic problems and what are the capable solutions to this problem? The second article is again from the Hindu newspaper, which is titled as Circumvention. This talks about the bypassing of the powers of the state, the political status of the states by the center, and how much is it constitutional and should it be done or not, has been the question which has been discussed in this article. And the third article is titled as The Outdated Nature of Bureaucracy. This is a very beautifully written article, though it was a bit out of line for our law exam specifically. But the purpose we took it was this is something, bureaucracy is something that none of us can escape from. So that was the reason that what is the problem, the key problem with the kind of bureaucratic system that we have in the country. That is why we have taken up this article. And finally, we have the News in Flash column. I'm delighted to introduce myself to all of you guys. This newspaper analysis is presented by me. My name is Sheva Khan, and I am a law graduate and had graduated in the year 2019 from Uttaranchal University with a gold medal in my batch. I have been a national debater and a public speaker, and I, at LawSeco, work as the current affairs expert and manager for free content and outreach. If you wish to connect with me or reach out to me, you can always find me on my Twitter as well as LinkedIn handles. Both are available in the description box. On this note, let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Which of the following is a social security law in India? Your options are Minimum Wages Act, the Labour Welfare Fund Act, Maternity Benefit Act, or all of the above. If you know the answer, put it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question of the day. Do you think that the Indian Federation is a center-biased one, what we also call as the quasi-federal country? Give reasons for your answer. With this, let's get started with the first article of the day, which talks about the poor health infrastructure of the country. So the article says that the second wave of the COVID-19 has exposed the abysmally poor state of India's health infrastructure. Now, to be honest here, it is not only just the second wave, rather at the time of the first wave of the COVID-19 also, the problems, the issues that were there in the Indian healthcare system and infrastructure had already come up front. And if we talk about the second wave in specific, it has even shown the worsened face of the healthcare infrastructure. This article presents very nicely as to what are the key problems or what are the key areas where we need to focus in the Indian healthcare infrastructure. So the first point is about the stagnant expenditure. Now here, by stagnant expenditure, we mean that the expenditure, the money that we are spending in the health infrastructure is way too stagnant. Now, what is this money actually we are talking about? So ultimately, this is the share of the GDP that goes to the healthcare system. So as per the 2013 and 14 data, only 1% of the gross domestic product of the GDP of the country went to the healthcare infrastructure. Now, can you imagine that of this huge economy that India is, and out of this huge population that India has, India is the second most populous country after China. Do you think that only 1% of the GDP is it sufficient to cater to the needs of the people and the healthcare they need in the country? Definitely not. And if at all we think that we had some kind of improvement into the coming years, so that either isn't the case. So as according to the data of 2017-18, the GDP expenditure into the healthcare or the health infrastructure went from 1% to just 1.28%. And this goes for the center, all states and the union territories. So definitely we know that there are a lot of areas that are under priority and where the government has to spend the money of the GDP. But of course, we need to understand that health is wealth. Now, the biggest example of this is the coronavirus, wherein if the people were not healthy, if they were not able to work because they were not healthy or there was a danger to their health, we had to strike off the economic growth as well. So, definitely, we can see that the health of the people of the nation is directly proportional to the economic growth of that nation. Healthier the population, faster and better and richer is the economic growth. And that is why we need to understand that if at all we want a better GDP, a better economic growth, and at a better global pace as well for the country, we direly need to invest into the healthcare of the country, of the children, the people, the youngsters, and everybody. The women, maternal mortality rate is very high, wasting and stunting of children, malnutrition is very high in the country. So all these things need to be tackled very nicely. Then, health being a state subject, the state spending constitutes 68.6% of all the government expenditure. Now, as we must know that the health is a state subject, so it falls into the list 2 under 7 schedule. So here the states are the one that spend most on the health. So please do not think that the states are spending out of everything, they're spending most on the states. Rather, out of all the resources, these are the states that are spending the most. So please, I hope that you are not confused with the point that, like for example, there are 10 things where money has to be invested. So it is not the case that it is health where the largest share of money is being invested. No, that is not the case. Rather, what the case is that between the center and the states are investing more into the healthcare. So that is the current scenario. And definitely, even in the times of the second wave of COVID-19, we have noticed that ignoring its complete failure to take care of the situation, the center has put up the entire burden to tackle with the oxygen shortage and other stuff on the states directly. And the second issue that has been pointed out in this article regarding India's health infrastructure is the interstate variation and expenditure. So as per the CEDA, which is the Center for Economic Data and Analysis, Kerala and Delhi have the highest per capita healthcare expenditure, whereas UP, Bihar, and Jharkhand have the lowest, which means that one person, how much does he spend on his particular healthcare expenditure, that is highest in Kerala and Delhi, whereas it is worst in the case of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Jharkhand. Also, 62% of the total healthcare expenditure in India is out of pocket expenditure, which is highest in the world according to the World Health Organization. Now, here we need to understand that what is the out of pocket expenditure. For example, if a person, anyone who is our acquaintance, God forbid, suffers from a disease wherein he needs to invest money for the cure or treatment, here it is rarely that he is covered under some schemes. See, obviously, we have schemes like Ayushman Bharat and various other schemes which help the people, specifically from the poor backgrounds, to get their diseases treated or get their ailments treated. But still, to be very real and practical with the fact, many people, in fact, most of the people in the country, specifically the poor people, have to take debts or loans, or they have to take money from some resource so as to get their healthcare system done, or to get a cure, or to get their disease treated. And in this situation, 62% of the healthcare expenditure in India is done out of the pocket of that particular person and not through the government schemes or the government funding. And this 62% of the out of pocket expenditure on healthcare, which takes place in India, is the highest in the world according to WHO. So, can you understand when, ironically, at one side we say that Ayushman Bharat is the largest pan health provider scheme, or it is the largest such service provider scheme for the health sector in the entire world, and ironically, the people who are spending the money out of their pocket are also the largest from our own country. So, definitely, there is some discrepancy that is going on, which means that the real benefit, the real purpose of Ayushman Bharat is still not being served to the real beneficiaries or the people who actually needed these kinds of schemes. And the poor in the poorest state are the worst victims of the health emergency. Now, be it anything in the world, it has always been the case that the poor have suffered more. In the times of COVID-19 also, the rich people in India, they became even richer and the poor became poorer. So if we talk about the role that the government plays in this situation, Firstly, it needs to implement a coordinated national plan at the center level to fight the pandemic, which will help in distribution of constrained resources. Now, as we know that there are a lot of things, maybe let's say about the vaccines, about the oxygenated beds, or any kinds of other injections like the remdesivir and the other injections, all these things, they need to come under one umbrella national plan at the hands of the center, wherein we can cumulatively fight against this pandemic. Secondly, currently the state controls major decisions, including additional resources like the PM CARES Fund, better vaccine price, etc. And that is why the center needs to be very, very sensitive while making use of these additional resources. Thirdly, during the second wave, the center has shifted major responsibilities to the states, as we were just discussing, and we should not allow the central government to just shed off its shoulders from any kinds of responsibilities and just put it entirely on the states, because definitely it is the government of all the people and it is answerable to all of us. And lastly, there is a need to create pandemic preparedness unit by the central government to streamline surveillance, reporting, management, formulation, and communication regarding all the steps that are taken to mitigate the pandemic at the better score. Let's get started with the second article of the day, which talks about the center-state relationship. So recently what has happened is that there have been two recent incidents or events that have raised concern that the center wants to bypass the elected leadership while dealing with the states. In this situation, we need to understand that if at all there is the president's rule under Article 356 of the Constitution in any particular state, then obviously the center can interfere into the matters of the state, be it the legislative matters, be it any kind of executive or administrative matters. But if there is no any situation of president rule or such kind of an emergency, then definitely the elected government, the elected leadership of a particular state should not be bypassed by the center. But recently, what has happened is that the Prime Minister had taken a meeting with the district magistrates and the state officials to review the COVID-19 situation. So ideally, these DMs and state officials are answerable to the chief minister of that particular state. But here it is very much evident that this entire position or this entire hierarchy of the chief minister was completely overlooked by the center, and the PM directly chose to take the meetings for the DMs as well as the state officials. And the second similar incident was when the Union Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank had called for a meeting with the state secretaries to discuss class 12 examinations. In this situation, it comes very much evidently that the center is not paying a lot of heed, or it is not either choosing to give a lot of respect to the elected leadership of the states. Though we should sit here, think about it, the fact that just the way the government at the center is elected by the people at large, similarly, the people of that particular state had chosen this government. And if at all the central government chooses to bypass that elected government of the state, in a way, it bypasses the decision, the will of the people of that state. And definitely that has no ground in the constitution. But does that mean that there has been never ever a precedent of this sort, or does the constitution provides absolutely nothing in this direction? Well, that's not the case either, because we have had precedents in this direction, wherein Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had addressed the heads of district administration in Uttar Pradesh on the issue of Panchayati Raj. On this note, please keep a note that the system of Panchayati Raj that we are blessed to have, so it was actually brought or given constitutional status thanks to the Rajiv Gandhi government, because he had been a sole leader who was successfully able to give constitutional status to the Panchayati Raj institution via the means of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. So if at all we try to give justification of this kind of act that is done by the central government, so it says that the direct interaction were permissible under Articles 256 and 257 of the Constitution. Let's see what do these two articles provide in the Constitution. So under Articles 256 and 257, the states are obliged to comply with the laws made by the Parliament, and also allows some directions from the Union government. But it should be made sure that there is no kind of colorable legislation over here, in a way that the center is not willingly try to bypass or overlook the regime or overlook the elected leadership of the state, and only doing something that is within its jurisdiction and ambit of powers. So here the article says that although the Disaster Management Act has been invoked, keeping in mind the COVID pandemic, still the political structures at the states should not be undermined at all. And thus, we should be having what we call as a cooperative federalism and not a competitive federalism, which unfortunately, but in the real sense, yes, has been seen in the case of India as well. Let's get to our third article for the final discussion on the topic outdated nature of bureaucracy. So, this says that the COVID 19 has tested the resilience and strength of all public institutions. But the bureaucracy has emerged as a major concern for the ineffective response to COVID. So, in a way, this article says that why have we not been able to respond properly and in the right time against the COVID 19 pandemic is because of the system of bureaucracy that we follow in our country. So, why is it outdated? Before learning that, let's understand that what do we mean by the bureaucracy? So, the bureaucracy is the part of government, it is the wing of government which consists of the permanent executives. Now, what do we mean by the permanent executives? All the civil servants, for example, we have the IS officers, we have the IRS officers, IFS officers, IPS officers, all of these are the permanent executives of the government. For example, when the government is formed at the center or the states, then we have the prime minister, the president, the chief minister, governor, as the case may be, who are the executives. But definitely, these are not the permanent executives, because obviously, once the government would change at these particular forums, then they would also cease to remain as the executives. But that is not the case with the bureaucracy. These servants, these officials, or these posts which are brought through the bureaucracy system, which is the IAS, IPS, etc., these are the permanent bureaucrats. So, irrespective of what government or which government is there at the center of the states, they remain to be the executive working functional bodies of the government. And this article says that this system of bureaucracy that we follow, now which system is it, has been named as the Weberian bureaucracy or the Weberian bureaucracy. And it says that this, what we are following is, has been completely outdated. So it says that the generalists are preferred over specialists under this Weberian bureaucracy, which we're talking about. What happens is that, as we know, if any one of you who's listening to this analysis knows about the general syllabus of the UPSC examination or the civil services examination syllabus, it is a generalistic syllabus which has bits and pieces of almost everything that we can study. Thus, a person who is chosen for this particular post is the one who is not a specialist in a particular field or area, rather, he's a generalist person in the approach, which means that instead of knowing everything of one thing, he knows little things about almost everything. So when we call as the jack of all trades but master of none. So similarly, it's the similar situation over here. And this article says that as a result of this generalistic approach in our Indian bureaucratic system, as a result, the specialists in every government department have to remain subordinate to the general officers, such as the IAS and state civil servants. So ultimately, in the system of hierarchy, the generalists, that is the IAS and other state civil servants, they remain at a higher level as compared to the specialists. And if we talk about the situation what took place in the during COVID situation, the healthcare professionals who were the specialists have been made to work under the generalist officers, and thus the policy decisions are left with generalists. So the only idea that has been projected in this particular article is that for tackling specific kinds of problems, we need people who are specialized or who are specialists of that particular issue. And that is why if we leave the decision making power in the hands of a generalistic person, so definitely either the outcomes would be delayed or the outcomes would not be as quality as they should have been or they could have been. So here the justification that has been given is that the generalists provides a broader perspective as compared to a specialist. Now that definitely is an undefeatable argument, because see, when we talk about the basic administration of the country, it is not something that that administration has to take place in one particular area or field only. That administration many a times has to be generalistic, wherein one should be able to calculate as to what will be the impact of his actions or his decisions on various other stakeholders also, and not just that stakeholder which is directly associated with it. For example, if at all there is a problem of electricity distribution in a particular village, now if there is a person who is specialist into this, might only focus about that the how and when and by what means can electricity be provided to this particular village. Maybe he would not take under account any kind of ecological barriers, maybe he would not take into account any kind of economic limitations, but only focus on providing electricity to that particular village. Though definitely an expert opinion here can be gained through the specialist person, but a person who is a generalistic, the general bureaucrat in the country currently that we have, he would not only focus on providing the electricity, but also equally give chance, and it will equally he will equally give focus to the economical limitations, to the ecological limitations, etc. And thus, maybe a more balanced decision can be expected out of a generalistic person. But definitely, there are pros and cons to both these types of bureaucracy. So the problem here is that the bureaucracy is stuck with leadership position over leadership of function, with rigid adherence to rules and rejection of innovation. So this article says that here in this Weberian bureaucratic system, what problem we are facing is that instead of the leadership of function, which means the leadership of some specialist thing, what we have is the leadership of position, as in whoever is high on the position is considered to be higher, irrespective of the fact whether he has any specific knowledge of that particular field or not. So, if we talk about the leadership of function and not position in detail, so it says that the leadership of function is when a person has expert knowledge of a particular responsibility, and the role of leader is to explain the situation instead of issuing orders. And every official involved in a particular role should respond to the situation rather than relying on some dictation. So here the article also provides for a few steps that can be taken in this direction. Firstly, to introduce a new public management, wherein it would promote privatization and managerial techniques of private sector to improve public service delivery. And secondly, it would be based on collaborative governance in which public, private, civil society, and even NGOs can work together for effective public delivery, service delivery. Let's see now that what do we have for news and flash today. Firstly, today we have the National Anti-Terrorism Day. So it is observed on 21st of May. So it is observed every year to highlight the suffering of the common people and how it is prejudicial to national interest. So on this day in the year 1991, former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, and thus 2021 is the 30th death anniversary of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Second, China-Tibet highway has been completed after 7 years of construction. So China has completed the construction of a strategically significant highway through world's deepest canyon in Tibet along the Brahmaputra River. Also, please remember that the Brahmaputra River in the region of Tibet is known as Yarlung Zangbo. So this also is an important question which can be asked. So it has enabled access to remote areas along the disputed border with Arunachal Pradesh, which is in India. And the project was undertaken by China Huining Group with an estimated investment of over 2 billion yuan, that is approximately $310 million. And thirdly, COVID self-home testing. So the ICMR has approved India's first COVID-19 self-testing kit for home use developed by My Lab Discovery Solutions in Pune. So the name of this home testing kit is COVID Self. With this, we are done for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. Thank you so much for staying tuned with LawSikho.